Hi everyone, Alisa, Scott, and I decided to do our presentation on the polio virus. This is a virus in which one's nervous system becomes compromised, causing paralysis. This virus can also be fatal. Although the virus is not curable, there are treatment options available to those who are affected. We'll go into more detail as we go on with this presentation. In this first picture, this is a child with the polio virus. As you can see, his muscles and bones show obvious deformities due to the paralysis that the virus creates. In this picture, a child is wearing a brace. Doctors put those affected by the virus in these braces to help those muscles and bones to continue growing in the right direction and minimize deformities. This picture shows a young girl with severe deformities in her legs and hips. Without access to treatment or braces like shown before, there is no way to prevent these extreme deformities from happening. This is a virus that has affected millions of people, especially those who live in poverty and unclean areas. Kids under the age of 5 are the ones who are mostly affected by the virus. To find out what you can do to help stop the spread of the virus, visit polioeradication.org. I chose to speak on the etiology and reservoir of the polio virus. So the etiology for this disease is pretty complex. The technical name for it is enterovirus poliomyelitis. This small RNA virus is surrounded by a protein capsid without a lipid envelope, which in return makes the poliovirus resistant to lipid solubles and able to remain stable at a low pH. Polio then multiplies throughout the body, including the small intestine, the blood, and all of that leads up to the central nervous system where it has a high affinity for motor nerves. This virus was once said to be able to thrive only in a low pH. Recent research proved this to be wrong, actually. Other acidic viruses were combined with a basic solution which would create a basic sort of environment for that virus and inhibit the virus from thriving. The same test was done on the polio virus, and it continued to thrive regardless of the basic pH. And this is so important because, or it was a really good finding because this means that the virus can spread and flourish in many different hosts and environments regardless of the acidity. In regards to the reservoir of this virus, humans are the only likely reservoir for this virus. Monkeys are thought to be infected with the virus, or higher primates, but it is unlikely that they are reservoirs in nature. Still more research is being done on that. The virus is spread through infectious humans or their waste. This all happens by means of fecal hand-oral transmission from one host to another person. This can be done through contaminated food, contaminated water, which is a really, really big one. One thing that I found to be really interesting about the polio virus is that currently in Pakistan, it's considered to be an extreme hotspot for the polio virus. There's many efforts to get clean water to the areas that are highly affected. They're trying to get as many volunteers over there as possible so that they can vaccinate people, kids, and all those that have been affected by it. The disease is currently spreading like wildfire over there. It's really crazy and really sad, and the numbers they're really increasing drastically every year.
So now we are going to talk about the signs and symptoms of polio.
Okay, so the majority of individuals will not even realize that they have the polio virus because they never become sick. They never have any kind of symptoms of polio. But for those that do, there are two types. There's paralytic and non-paralytic. So if you have non-paralytic polio, it means that you still have all the same symptoms of polio, but it does not lead to paralysis. This is also known as abortive polio. So with non-paralytic polio, some of the signs include fever, vomiting, and then in severe cases, meningitis. The symptoms include a sore throat, fatigue, they'll be very tired, a headache, this back pain and stiffness, which extends to the neck, so they'll also have stiffness or pain in the neck, and then this can also occur in the legs and arms as well. Eventually this will lead to muscle weakness and tenderness. For paralytic polio, you have all these same signs and symptoms that we mentioned before for about a week, and then after about a week there's new symptoms and signs occur, such as some of the symptoms are severe muscle aches and weakness. The signs include loss of reflexes, and then something known as flaccid paralysis, which is loose and floppy limbs, which usually occurs on only one side of the body. There's also 3 different types of paralytic polio. There's spinal polio, which means that it affects the spinal cord, bulbar polio, which affects the brainstem, and bulbospinal polio, which affects the brainstem and the spinal cord. One of the worst parts about polio are the post-signs and symptoms. These are signs and symptoms that continue to affect a person several years after the virus leaves the body, usually about an average of 35 years. So some of the signs of this are muscle atrophy, or wasting away of the muscle, sleep-related breathing disorders such as sleep apnea. They'll also they a lot of times have a hard time remembering things or concentrating, and then they also experience mood swings. The symptoms are they have progressive muscle or joint weakness and pain. They'll feel very tired, or they become exhausted just after minimal activity. Decreased tolerance for cold temperatures, and then depression, as well as breathing or swallowing difficulty.
Now we're going to go over the transmission of polio.
So next we will talk about the transmission of polio. So the polio virus lives in the throat and intestines of an infected person. It lives only in humans, no other animals. And then it's transmitted through contact with the feces or with the stool of an infected person. This is the most common way to get the disease and the most common way for it to be spread. It can also be in a person's saliva or spread through airborne droplets. So when someone who has polio sneezes or coughs, it can be transmitted that way as well. And also, one other thing to remember is that the polio virus lives for weeks in a person's feces, causing the virus to be extremely contagious for a very long period of time. Even after the person may not have symptoms, it'll still be living in the feces, causing it to still be spread.
So for my portion of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the treatment and prevention techniques of polio, as well as a brief history of the epidemiology of this disease. So fortunately, we do have vaccines for the polio virus that are highly effective, and there are 2 different types of polio vaccines. We have the oral poliovirus vaccine, or OPV, and an inactivated poliovirus vaccine, or IPV. And both of these vaccines are similar in that they produce immunity by way of active immunization, which is just a way to produce immunity by delivering either a live, weakened or attenuated strand of a virus, or a killed strand of a virus, or even a portion of a virus into a recipient, resulting in an immune response that stimulates antibody production against the virus, and therefore it produces immunity by preparing the body for contact with that virus in the future. But these 2 different types of vaccines also differ, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them in detail in these next couple slides. So first we're going to talk about oral poliovirus vaccines, or OPVs. These vaccines contain live attenuated strains of the poliovirus types, and attenuated just means weakened. And there's 3 different types of OPVs. There's a trivalent OPV, which contains all 3 strains, a bivalent OPV, which contains 2, and a monovalent OPV, which contains 1 of the strains of the virus. These vaccines produce antibodies in the bloodstream as well as the intestinal immune system, which is very important since we know that this virus likes to hang around in the intestines. This is the type of vaccine that you're going to see in underdeveloped and developing countries. because it is very easy to administer. It's administered orally, and there's no need for sterile equipment or training to do this. So it can be given to thousands of children, in a matter of a few days. It's fairly inexpensive to produce compared to the other type of polio vaccine, and that intestinal immune response that this produces, it creates a passive immunization for others, for those that are living in the same village or the same city as these the people that may contract the disease. However, because this vaccine does contain live strains of the virus, it has been known to cause VAPP, or vaccine-associated paralytic polio, which is where, in process of trying to immunize the recipient, they actually contract the disease. But that risk is very low, and this vaccine has been proven to be highly effective, producing immunity in over 95% of the recipients only after 3 doses. So inactivated polio virus vaccines are a little bit different than OPVs in that they contain killed strains of the 3 poliovirus types rather than weakened strains. These vaccines still produce antibodies in the bloodstream, and there's no risk for VAPP because of this, because that they are killed strains of the virus, and they are proven to be highly effective. This is the type of vaccine that we've all probably received when we were children. There is a low immune response in the intestinal tract, and so it doesn't produce that same passive immunization as the OPV does, and it is fairly expensive to produce, as well as the training that's required to administer this vaccine. However, it is still highly effective, and most children receive 4 doses or 3 regular doses and a booster shot between 2 months and 6 years old. I just want to talk briefly about a short history of the epidemiology of the polio virus and the eradication efforts that have been created to rid the world of this disease. Polio is an ancient disease. There's been Egyptian hieroglyphs found that show indications of the presence of polio as early as 1580 BC, and for centuries it has been a public health issue, but especially in the early 20th century, in the industrializing countries, polio was widely feared and was a major health issue at this time. Efforts were made to create vaccines for this in the early 1950s and 1960s. Immunizations controlled the transmission of the disease in the more developed countries, but underdeveloped and developing countries, it still was a major issue until 1988. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative began, and groups of organizations came together to work together to try to eradicate polio from the world. And since then, millions of children have been immunized from polio. It's been very successful, and the polio cases have decreased by 99%. But still, there's 2 countries left, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Most of the world's been eradicated of polio, but in these 2 countries, there's still some opposition that they face that hinders these efforts. But still, polio has been almost completely eradicated globally, thanks to vaccines. So that is our presentation. I hope you guys liked it, and hope you guys learned some stuff about polio today. And thank you for listening.